Well, today is, I believe it's July 20th, and we're here in Stratton, Colorado, moving towards Kansas, and it's about 7 o'clock tonight, and we're just under a tornado watch, and it's pretty windy here, and we have some of the strangest cloud formations we've ever seen up here. We can begin to see them like this, puffy clouds. It's really interesting. Just looking out towards the front of the RV park, here you can see blue skies, but on the left here, see if we can go over, and you can notice the wind is really blowing here, and we can go up and we can see these really bizarre looking puffy clouds just to the left here. We'll zoom in on these and see them a little more. Thunder is all around us. I'm going to go in a moment. Here are these really interesting looking puffy clouds. Real strange looking. There you can see the wind blowing gusts about 20 miles an hour. Right beyond the Bigfoot is a church that we're supposed to evacuate if we hear the siren. And there's lightning all around us here. And we hope we get through the evening. Again, we're in a tornado watch here in eastern Colorado.
Wichita. Until 10 p.m. Mountain Time, 11 p.m.
Mary's looking at the maps now. We've got the weather radio on.
And Cheyenne, Greeley, Logan, Sherman, Wallace, and Wichita counties of Kansas. A tornado warning continues to southwestern Yuma County of Colorado until 7:15 p.m. Mountain Time. At 6:57 p.m., National Weather Service.
Okay, we're under, in certain areas we're under a tornado warning here.
About 28 miles south of Yuma, moving south at 30 miles. Little with no advance warning. Prepare to move to a place of safety in a sturdy structure, such as a basement or small interior room if tornado is spotted.
It's talking about Stratton.
That's where we are. Warning for northern Kit Carson County until 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time.
That's about an hour from now.
A flash flood watch remains in effect tonight.
Here we are in Stratton, Colorado, and we're under hurricane, under tornado warning, I guess. Well, today is the 21st of July 2000, and we're here in Hays, Kansas, the site of old Fort Hays. And it was here that Custer's 7th Cav had a group organization. And also Buffalo Bill got a start, I believe, here, and also...
no, not here, down to another fort.
Okay, I guess it was another fort. Anyway, he was here.
Yeah.
And also we had, I guess it was Sheridan, General Sheridan was also here. So this is an important fort for history of the Midwest here in the 1800s. Here we have Fort Hays site, and there's I guess at least 2 officers' quarters which are still standing. We can see them here. We'll go have a look a little bit later. And there's a guardhouse. And we'll just look at the entire site here. This is Fort Hays in Kansas. There's a large buffalo here to commemorate the American buffalo. It's about 85 degrees today here in Hays, Kansas. Here's the inscription below the buffalo memorial. Herds of 60 million buffalo once roamed the prairie until reduced to 300 and near extinction. They were the basis of the Indian economy, food for the immigrant, railroad worker, and soldier. Yeah, great beast. We're going over to one of the officers' quarters, and here you can see, looks like they're getting ready to load one of their weapons. We'll have a discussion. We are at the officers' quarter. This is what, the 7th Cav?
actually, we're representing members of Company G of the 5th United States Infantry, which was here at Fort Hays in 1867. Generally speaking, us enlisted men wouldn't be over here at the officers' quarters, but today this is kind of our base of operations. So we're cleaning our rifles. We just got done with firing demonstration, but two of the weapons that we're talking about here. This particular soldier here is cleaning an 1863 Springfield rifle. This is the old muzzle-loading style weapon, designed by the Springfield Armory. Came out in 1863. It utilizes a 58 caliber paper cartridge round. There's 9 steps to load and fire this particular weapon. It starts with getting the cartridge up out of the cartridge box. Then you'd have to tear the head of the cartridge off, and you'd hold it up to the barrel, pour the powder down, and put the ball that was in the paper cartridge as well down in. Then you'd have to take your ramrod out, which we have here. Have everything in pieces. Then you'd ram that down in and set it good, seat it good against the bottom of the barrel. Then on the vent, if I can just move the barrel here, we'll show.
Yeah.
So you can see you put a percussion cap on the vent, which would then send, when the hammer struck the cap, would send a spark through the vent hole, which would set your powder charge off.
Great.
So there's about 9 steps to load and fire. It's kind of a slow loading creature, but it was quite a revolution during the Civil War, as in it had a rifled barrel, known as a rifled musket, and it was pretty effective with the 58 caliber rifle.
Great, thanks a lot. I'll get a close-up of the weapon here. Okay, the officer's got another rifle here. Are you an enlisted man?
I'm a sergeant.
Okay.
Lowly old non-commissioned officer.
What do you got there?
Okay, this is the 1866 Springfield breech-loading model. Just a little bit about its history. This was, when it started out, was actually an old 1863 muzzle-loading rifle, or rifled musket. What they did, the master armor of the Springfield Armory, a man named E.S. Allen, he cut a portion of the old barrel out and it milled in this breech block system to accept a 50-70 caliber, or 50-70 government, if you will, metallic cartridge case. Also in the conversion process, the riflings of the old 63 were bored out, and a sleeve liner was placed into the barrel to accept the new 50-70 caliber ammunition.
And could you hit a buffalo from how many yards or feet, or?
In combat use, up to 500 yards.
500 yards.
Yeah, 100 and 200, maybe 300 yards is a really good shot with one of these.
Oh boy, that's 2 or 3 football fields.
Bet.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Have a look in a moment, and this gal here, this lady who's one of the people who were to represent it, is going to tell a little bit about the story of this officer's quarters. Okay, let's hear something about this building.
Okay, this is a junior officer's quarter, so the normal person that probably would have been living here would have been a lieutenant. And 2 families would have lived here. Each family had a parlor on the basement, or on the ground level, and each family had 1 bedroom upstairs. Then they shared the dining room and kitchen area, and there was actually 6 houses just like this on Officers Row out of the 10 houses that were here.
Any famous people that we might hear about have slept here?
I can...
Like Wild Bill Hickok, or?
He wouldn't have been in any of these houses, and neither would have Custer. Custer was never stationed here.
Oh, I thought we thought that Custer was stationed here.
No, Custer was never stationed at Fort Hays, but they did have a Custer campsite that was a few miles.
How about Sheridan? Was he here?
Sheridan. Was Sheridan here? Go ahead.
I believe at some point, I don't quote me on the year, but I believe he was.
At some point.
How many people were at this fort at one time?
At the height of this fort, there was 4 companies, and each company consisted of 65 men.
And what was the purpose? What did they have this fort for?
This was a supply fort. It supplied, the railroad came through Hays, and so it supplied the other forts south of here with materials.
Did they ever have any problems with Indians here?
Indians never attacked here.
The Indians never attacked here. Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you. Well, there were 2 officer families staying here, and I guess this would be the drawing room. And the guide here says that most of these furnitures are original, or at least from the period. Here you can see a buffalo head. Here we have the fireplace. And we have an old organ. Here we have the kitchen. This is Fort Hays in Kansas. Guess this is the water for washing. Here we have the stairs to go upstairs. Most of this is pretty authentic.
In the visitor center.
Again, 2 officers stayed here and their wives. Here's one of the bedrooms for one of the officers' families. Heat by wood. And a dresser. Very nice. The sergeant's getting ready here to give us a short discussion of rations and what they would have eaten. And here is some of the food. Looks pretty good. I suppose some of it...
Well, it depends on how long they had to last.
Yeah.
The hardtack.
What is hardtack?
It's a biscuit.
Biscuit, yeah.
It doesn't get stale.
Okay. Uh-oh, here we go. Bringing some of the more goodies.
Okay. That's everything I wanted to talk about.
They keep bringing more food out. I think the officers ate real well here. Behind the officer quarters is the guardhouse. Is this the original guardhouse?
Yes, yes it is.
And anyone who would misbehave, what would be classified as misbehaving?
Depending on the time and who the commanding officer was, that could be any sort of infraction, from being out of uniform to back-talking a sergeant or officer, or doing something like being absent without leave or something of that nature, going to Hays City and becoming intoxicated.
What kind of quarters were they? Like a jail?
Yes, there was one big open room that the lesser prisoners were let to walk around pretty much free in, and then there were some like solitary confinement cells towards the back end of it.
Great.
For the war and in 1867 out here at Fort Hays. Generally speaking, there's 2 kinds of rations issued to troops. First is a marching ration. When you're out in the field, that consists of pretty much 3 things: salted meat or pork, hardtack, which is basically a hard flour cracker. All the only ingredients in hardtack is salt, flour, and water. Pretty basic, and it's baked really hard. And you can get an idea for it. And you get about a pound of this a day in the field, and you carry, generally speaking, about 3 days rations in your haversack when you go out in the field. As I said, the meat was salted, either salted beef, which was referred to as salt horse by most soldiers. It, generally speaking, had a tendency not to be real fresh, so salt pork was usually your better bet. It was usually a lot better quality of meat. So that was the meat ration. Second ration is the camp or garrison ration. You're going to be eating a little better when you're at an established post, like here at Fort Hays. After they became settled here, you have a little better selection of things. We're just going to talk about the basic ration of the time. Consisted mainly of rice. I have some example of dry store items, I guess basically I should preface that with. Things that were easy to keep, you could keep a lot on hand, and they stored relatively well. Rice, split peas, which I have here, what we call Great Northern beans, and these funny looking things here are called desiccated potatoes, which were basically dried potatoes. They came in 1-ounce cubes, which would bloat up almost 4 times their mass when you boiled them for an hour. Also, dry store items, as I said, onions, potatoes were another thing that were kept on hand when available, helped to supplement the ration a little bit. As far as other bread, at a sustained post like here at Fort Hays, the garrison ration will probably consist of baked bread. The bakery you'll see over to the east and south of us here, it was producing a loaf of bread per man every day. That equates to about 18 ounces of flour. Also, one of probably the most important parts of the garrison or the camp ration is the coffee issue. Coffee came in 3 different forms. There was green coffee in the whole bean form, roasted coffee in the whole bean form, and then ground coffee. Generally speaking, you probably get your Coffee beans issued to you roasted. You then in turn have to put them into your coffee grinder here in the camp, and this will probably be done over in the camp, the mess hall in the barracks. Then it'll be ground up, and then you'd be ready for boiling. Sugar was also another part of the ration. Generally speaking, the Indian War soldier liked sugar in his coffee, and if you were going out into the field, it was a very common practice to mix your sugar and your coffee ration together. So you have a little bit of sweet with every cup of coffee which you brew up in the field. Moving on to the other part of the ration, as I talked about the bread and hardtack thing. Also along with your what's known as the subsistence ration, also as well as the camp or garrison ration, was soap, which I have a little tiny bar of soap here, was part of the subsistence ration, and also your candles were another portion as well. As I said, sugar, some other things that called for it. I don't know how prevalent some of these were, depending on how readily available they were at the time. Molasses and vinegar were another large part. Salt and pepper, generally speaking, were all part of the ration itself. Some things that a soldier might use to spice his food up, other than vinegar and molasses, salt and pepper. I've noticed, I thought about when I started my program, I thought, well, these bottles, I got them right out of the grocery store, they're not very period. However, when you start looking at the dates on some of this stuff, Louisiana hot sauce was a very common condiment back then. It was pretty easy to get. Leah and Perrins, let's see if I can find a date on it. I think it was like 1865 or 1850, I don't remember which. And then we have McIlhenny's Tabasco sauce since 1868. So these are lasting condiments, and they were used quite frequently by the soldiers to improve the taste of the Army ration. So I'm hoping everybody's getting a sense that there was some sort of sense of variety to the Army diet. Now, I'm not going to talk about the quality of that was issued to the troops, but generally speaking, it was relatively decent subsistence. Anybody have any questions? Probably have a fairly decent selection of things.
Did they eat buffalo very much?
Maybe out in the field. From the research I'm doing right now, post records show that in 1867 you're having herds of fresh beef moved into the fort. So that would be another thing, and that would be probably the slaughter would go on one day, and then that beef would probably be sent right to the company mess halls, generally speaking. Cannon on each corner of that.
The sergeant,
basically
yeah,
rake
the sergeant's describing the blockhouse. Now, again, what did they do in the blockhouse?
Okay, at the time of the fort was in use, it became basically the post headquarters.
Okay.
It had like adjutants' offices and things like that in there. And generally, when a troop would come into the fort, that's where you'd probably check in. That's where the payday probably went on. Those sorts of official functions.
Thanks.
From 67 on, they had quite a bit of trouble with insects. Getting water to the garden was another very large problem, and so they were kind of an iffy bet.
Were there Indians on the base here as residents, or?
You would see some Indians probably come in to get subsistence occasionally. I know in 67 or 68 there's an account of a tribe of Indians coming in, and they were issued blankets and some rations, and then they moved on their way.
Are you a student of this period, or doing some studies?
I am a wannabe student of this period. I've been doing this for about 11 years.
Great.
I'm a summer interpreter here at the fort, and I've been reading and studying this for a long time. I started about 4th grade. I read a little book on the Battle of Little Bighorn, and been into it ever since.
Great, thanks. Here's an inscription. Trailhead, Fort Hays, Fort Dodge Road, 1867 to 1872. Used to transport military supplies from Fort Hays to Fort Dodge, 75 miles southwest. Used by the civilians until 1879. So this is the story of Fort Hays in brief. And it's a beautiful area, well preserved. There's again the blockhouse, and another structure over here, which we've already looked at. And so you can imagine what it was like 130, 40 years ago. It's a beautiful day here in Hays. And just off to the north is Fort Hays State University. And I think they focus a lot on agriculture. Be a great place to go to school. Well, we're going to go into the visitor center, and Mary has said there's a model of the old fort. Well, we're now in the visitor center, and the interpreter here has just said that there's only, what, 4 buildings left? And out of original, how many?
45.
45. So here you can see the fort the way it was back in the 1860s and the 1870s. So it was much larger than what we've just seen.
The buildings covered 65 acres.
The buildings covered 65 acres in this area. We'll look at some historical photographs now. Here we have a photograph of the old fort, and also a photograph of General Hayes. The fort was named after General Hayes. I believe he was killed in the Civil War, or participated in the Civil War. The visitor center is lined with some very nice posters showing the history of the fort, which was established mainly, I guess, to protect the workers from perhaps Indians, and also to assist in the development of the railroad. Here we see the enlisted men's barrack at Fort Hayes. Fort Hayes was known as a 4-company post because it had barracks for 4 companies of soldiers. A company was comprised of 100 men. Here we have the 7th Cavalry encamped near Fort Hayes in 1869. Custer and his wife spent time here in 1869.
I know. We talked about that.
I think that's Custer that's standing, and his wife on the right. Here we have the 18th Infantry Band in 1886. The band provided popular entertainment both at the fort and in Hayes City. Here we have another picture of George Custer and his wife Elizabeth, camped near Fort Hayes in 1869. George Custer and his wife at Fort Hayes, 1869. Looks like they're having dinner. Here we show Buffalo Bill in the front on the right, and also when he was older on the right, and also Custer and his wife Elizabeth on the left. Well, I guess everyone knows that my mother was a Cody, and also my aunt, 2 aunts, and also my grandfather and grandmother. My grandfather was Ernest Elder Cody, descendant of Wild Bill. Let's see if there's any family resemblance here. Here we are, 3 Codys.
We have a few faithful ones.
3 pictures of 3 Codys.
Are you guys doing the twilight tour?
It's at 7:30. It's a free thing.
Let's see, was that, maybe that was not Buffalo Bill on the right. That might have been Wild Bill Hickok. Let me check this out. Okay, here we have on the left Bill Cody, and on the right Wild Bill Hickok. And I'm going to jump in the picture here. Yeah, okay, here we go. Yeah, we've got it. Wild Bill Hickok and Wild Bill Cody. And most everyone knows that my grandfather was Elder Cody, so there's some descendant to this fellow right here.
And now it's shut off.
Well, we're the 21st of July 2000, Sunday, and we're here at the Eisenhower Museum, and we about 10:15, and we've just pulled up next to a Lance camper and also a Ford 350, so I thought I'd do a little bit of comparison. The two campers are about the same in terms of overall size, and we were thinking about the Lance on the right before we bought the Bigfoot. Here we are in the rear, showing the two campers, and the Bigfoot sits up high by about, looks like it's about 6 or 8 inches. And the advantage of the Lance over the Bigfoot is it sits quite a bit lower, so you can see here clearly how much lower it sits than the Bigfoot. Of course, here we see the Bigfoot and its steps, which is always an issue, although we're quite used to it. And here you can see the step arrangement for the Lance, which sits quite a bit lower. It's just one pull down, and that's all there is in terms of the step for the Lance. But,
glad to see another camper on the road, and see you got the Bigfoot.
Right, here's
with a Lance, and
right.
And this is the only way to go.
This is the only way to go. These are
We've been
these
north
are
of the Arctic Circle, up to Inuvik, up in the Northwest Territories, over the Mackenzie River, and you can't do that with a fifth wheeler or a big coach.
Great. Okay, these are the owners, and their names are Mr. and Mrs.
Dick and Kathy Como.
Dick and Kathy Como, and there's their Lance next to the Bigfoot, and oh boy, let's celebrate these campers. Bye-bye. Well, here we are on the 21st of July in Abilene, Kansas, and we're going to be visiting the Eisenhower Center. And it's a beautiful grounds here. They've got a museum, they've got the early home of Eisenhower, they got a visitor center, and it really is nice here in Abilene. It's Sunday morning, and we just met some nice people who have a camper too, and maybe we'll meet them later in Florida. It's a very nice area here. They've got a library, and they've got some wonderful grounds here in Abilene. First, let me correct the date. The date is the 23rd of July 2000. And here we have the boyhood home of Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower. And it sits just behind the visitor center. Okay. And these are more of the grounds. Very peaceful here on Sunday morning. Here we are at the Eisenhower Museum. We're going to go have a look. It's a really nice facility. We're in the lobby of the museum, and it's just a beautiful lobby. All around us here are murals showing a lot to do with Eisenhower. I guess this is when he's being sworn in as president. Here we can see another large mural. What, do you see a carrier over there? Right. Yeah, the big carrier over there.
With all the equipment on
With all the
top.
equipment, we'll zoom in on that. It's beautiful. On the other wall is a large mural showing more activities related to the World War II. In the museum, this shows the mother and father of the Eisenhower family. And there were 6 brothers in this family. All turned out very well, professional people. And here we have the father, right here. Okay, that's the father. father of Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower attended West Point as a cadet, and this shows some of his uniforms. Here are some of Eisenhower's classmates, and there was the largest number of generals and lieutenant generals graduated during his class. To the left we have a early picture of Eisenhower and his wife.
He was a reliable and trustworthy boy, and that's the kind of man he became. 50 years after his birth, he would lend his name to 2 decades of the American story, 2 decades of unparalleled tumult and achievement, the Eisenhower years. Whatever the challenge, in ending the war or building the peace, in dealing with the nation or with the world, in creating change or responding to it. At center stage throughout those 20 years was one man, and only one man. Center stage in war, center stage in peace. Dwight David Eisenhower. Ike, the man from Abilene. It was a time of memorable leaders, of men whose images would loom tall through history. Some were more dramatic than Ike as they sought the limelight, and some were more charismatic and even majestic. Some were more eloquent as they fixed their words in the world's memory. But none was more quietly effective than Eisenhower. Throughout the 20 years, some on that world stage were incredibly ruthless, and others were known for their recklessness. But Eisenhower, the man of compassion and decency, proved tougher than them all. And there were leaders on that stage far more controversial, and politicians far more partisan. But none inspired more trust then, or respect now, than this man with the low-key style and the winning smile. Later generations who had not ever seen him in action might remember him for only the smile, but there was so much more. On his desk at the White House was a small plaque that said in Latin, "Gently in manner, strongly in deed." That was Ike. As a young man of 20, he wanted to go to the Naval Academy at Annapolis, but was appointed instead to West Point. There, to the small-town values he brought from Abilene, were added military training, discipline, and the West Point creed of duty, honor, country, but above all, duty. In the years after West Point, his Army career found him summoned, with many at his side, to serve as staff to the towering figures of the First World War, men like General Douglas MacArthur and General Pershing. In January of 1940, when he was Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower, in command of the 1st Battalion of the 15th Infantry at Fort Lewis, Washington, neither he nor Mamie nor anyone else could have begun to imagine what the next 20 years would bring. But a war was raging in Europe.
1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Of General George Marshall, President Roosevelt put General Eisenhower in command of all U.S. forces in Europe. And then the Allies made him commander of their combined forces. For 2 years of disciplined planning with the military and patient diplomacy with the Allies, he waited for the right moment to strike at Hitler's Europe. June 5th, 1944, an assembled army awaits his decision. A chief weatherman reports that the weather is uncertain over the English Channel and that it may grow worse. The general consults with his experienced staff, but in the end, he must decide alone. Ike makes the decision. Attack in the morning. And nobody on Earth could predict the outcome. In 1948, the trustees of Columbia University invited him to become its president. An unusual job for a general, but the trustees had complete confidence in him. And it was justified. As always with Ike, the job sought the man. This time, he agreed to organize and command the multinational forces of NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization would protect the hard-won peace of Europe from the Republicans and came home in time for the convention. Robert Taft of Ohio, known everywhere as Mr. Republican, arrives at the convention with 607 delegates pledged to him. That's 3 more than he needs for the nomination. But it doesn't work out that way. The surge to Ike is irresistible. And I Like Ike becomes perhaps the best known political slogan of the century. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody like Ike.
Here we have the place of meditation, and in there is where Mamie and Dwight Eisenhower are buried, along with their son, who died at 1921 at 3 years old. Very nice in here. Well, facing the meditation temple is this fine statue of Eisenhower. Mary has walked over to these 5 pillars of peace. We'll see what she's reading in a moment. Well, Mary is over here now at these 5 pillars of peace, I guess at the east end of the grounds, and these were erected by the Daughters of American Revolution, and Mary will read one of them. Okay, Mary's going to read this.
The men and women of our armed forces walk amid dancers, and many gave their lives for freedom by dedicated duty to their beloved nation. They have preserved our God-given rights, our national honor, and the freedom won by our forefathers. The Kansas Clubs of Soroptimist, the International Association of the American Federation.
Okay, here we have another view
Because
of
I know that
the main grounds, and to the left over here is the Eisenhower Library, And just right behind us are the 5 pillars of peace. Well, we're back at the museum again. We didn't finish because we had to go back to see the video. So we're in the museum now. Well, just underneath the museum are a collection, well, it's a bird nest. And you can see the babies on the left, and you can see the small birds on the right. The mother and father, I guess they're feeding him right now. Again, it's just at the entrance to the museum. Well, the museum is just filled with artifacts, and this shows here some of the airplanes. This one's called a Columbine that was flown by the president. There's an Aero Commander back there, and there's the first presidential helicopter. Several things on our display here, and there's an elephant, porcelain elephant given by Denmark, some silver given by, I believe, Indonesia or Thailand to the president. This part of the museum is dedicated to the First Ladies, and here we have some dresses of First Ladies. Here we have the dress worn by the First Lady. Ulysses Grant was the president.
Every president's wife asked that the Smithsonian display her gown with its back to visitors. Give up? Stick around and we'll...
Here we are in the military section of the museum, and this is Eisenhower's staff car. It's a 1942 Cadillac and was used during World War II by Eisenhower, and then he used it up until 1956. It was then repainted black for use in the U.S. and then repainted green for the museum. It had over 200,000 miles on the speedometer when it was put out of duty. Here we have the 57mm anti-tank gun. Required 10 men to operate and used in World War II. Here we have the M20 armored utility car, capable of pretty good speed, and had a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on top, again used in World War II. No picture could be complete without a nice view of the Jeep used in World War II. Here are some miscellaneous communications equipment, and also this flare gun used to send signals. It's a pyrotechnic pistol. Here's a display of medals, and Mary's just found one that we have. This one right here. What is it, Mary? Can you mention?
It's the Victory Medal, World War II, United States.
And Mary received it from a lady in California?
Yes, a lady that lived across the street from my parents, and I had helped her in her move to another residence, and I was in the probably 7th grade.
Very nice. Here's a real famous picture. We've seen a lot of newsreels. The picture's on the right, and you can see the porcelain or ceramic reproduction there on the left. That's the celebration of D-Day to VE Day, victory in Europe. The museum is filled with little alcoves, display areas for gifts received by the president. A little green box is one that was given to Mamie Eisenhower by Nikita Khrushchev. It's made out of malachite, which is a copper ore, and it's from Russia. Here we have some items that were given to the president by Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, and these are made of solid silver and gold. They're little jewelry boxes.
Here we have some Steuben glass that was presented to the President by the, I guess, Steuben Crystal Company, and he used to frequently also give these items as gifts to dignitaries attending the White House.
Well, we've been here for about 2 hours, and I think we've just barely scratched the surface of this wonderful area, museum, and the entire Eisenhower Visitor Center and National Site. We're returning to the nest of barn swallows. Mary's trying to get their attention. There's one up there. Yeah, there they are. These are barn swallows. You can see them. Well, we're getting ready to leave now. We've been here for about 2 hours. Here's the home of the Eisenhowers, restored, and it's just at the historic site here in Abilene, Kansas.